This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to the program. Joining me now, John Brummett, columnist with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Always good to see you here at the beginning of the week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me to join you to talk about affairs of the day, whatever you think that they are. So
Well, speaking of affairs of the day, I guess one of the big bombshells that drops at the very end of the week last week is the $83 million verdict against former President Donald Trump in the E. Jean Carroll case.
Yes.
If you've watched the reaction to it, it seems to have muted him from talking about her, at least on his Truth Social account for a little bit. But this is kind of a big development, and I think it portends of what Asa Hutchinson and Nikki Haley and a lot of Republicans have said. This guy's going to be radioactive for us if we keep him as our perennial nominee, but it doesn't seem to be slowing him down.
You know, I don't see it quite the way you do. I mean, I'm just numbed to his radioactivity. Maybe his kind of radioactivity is if you survive it for a couple of years, it no longer has any effect. And maybe I'm asleep at the switch on this, but to me, this was okay. A Manhattan verdict. The Trump base says it's some liberal jurors. Okay, he misbehaved during the trial, causing, I think, the jury to decide to punish more than normal. Okay, he's going to appeal it. He probably won't have to pay this much. I'm not seeing it as a development of the size I think you are. I'd welcome your counter thought on that, but well, I mean, he's under 90 indictments from our federal government and state courts, and yet he proceeds apace. So, yeah, he's a guy with severe vulnerabilities. We know that. That's the only way Joe Biden can beat him, is vulnerabilities. I'm not sure this verdict, this sentence, changes that dynamic numerically or in terms of momentum or dynamic. Anyway.
I think you get this one under the belt. What happens if there's a second one? What happens if there's a third one from these 91 indictments that you're talking about? I know there's a push to delay all of that from the Trump team, but it seems like there is handwriting on the wall for the Republicans who claim repeatedly they like his policies, but they don't necessarily like him. They have an alternative to him with the same policies, but they don't seem to want to go with it.
Perhaps you're right, and I can't understand. I can't really feel the vibe if this is now followed up with some devastating testimony and evidence at trial as soon as March, possibly, and then if convictions indeed start to pile. I don't know how that's going to feel, both to me and to the 48% of the people who tell posters they prefer him for president, no matter what, and the overwhelming 70+% of Republicans. Don't know. You may be right. This alone hasn't. I don't think the needle's moving much, at least for me. But maybe I tend to get weary after a while, and Trump is a wearying political figure, as you know.
I believe that's the strategy, is to wear you down, John.
They've got to succeed. They've got to succeed.
Let's talk about this border security issue that becomes, it still is the alarm ringing of the week, of the month, I suppose. You see Republicans wringing hands over it. There is some, rightfully so in some respects. You have seen the Biden administration and Democrats and Republicans in the Senate trying to negotiate some sort of deal. It looks like Trump is going to blow that up, and you can look at the House Speaker's comments on this. I mean, what does that say about the state of our politics that we can't negotiate in a presidential election year on an issue that is supposedly most important? Is this an opening for Joe Biden to basically say, I'm trying to work with these guys and they won't do it? You better give me Democratic majorities? Or is this a a stick that the Republicans can just keep beating the Democrats with, and they don't want to give it up yet.
It's both. Here's what we don't solve problems anymore because uh, government solving government problems would remove electoral issues. That's simply the level of our dysfunction. Uh, I've just finished a column in which everybody's to blame, the Republicans more, but being less blameworthy than the other is hardly good bumper sticker material. It's too, you have to make the letters too small to make that your message. I'm saying we're going through this nonsense now, so that or this failure to produce this compromise, so that in October we can have a debate in which two old men scream at each other, talk over each other, each having some basis to blame the other for the fact that the immigration system is out of control and is not being addressed. That's what we're going to get out of it. All of that for that kind of racket, which is about all we get. The Republicans have tied Ukraine aid to the border. They've got a great issue on the border. Now they've got moderate Republicans and McConnell types in the Senate are willing to do this negotiation, which among other things would let Biden, when you've got an average of 5,000 crossing the border every day, shut down the border. Biden says, give me that law and I'll shut down the border immediately. But then you've got Trump, who doesn't want the issue solved because he wants people to believe the only way to solve our problem there and elsewhere is to restore his greatness to the Oval Office. You have him having won the first two primaries, and now all the Republicans are afraid of him. And you have Biden, who's hardly blameless. If he wanted the power to shut down the border, he could have singularly moved on that policy months ago. He could have. And now you see him rushing to say, I'll shut down the border the minute they give me the law, but they won't give me the law because it's their fault. He's got himself a little talking back point politically. And it's all, I guess, going to implode like everything does. And then it's all tied to Ukraine, because we don't do single issues anymore. You use a big issue by pairing it with another big issue of a countering dynamic, so that everybody can have leverage to cover their own behinds and blame the other. That's what we got. And I've been decrying. I hate politics anymore, Roby. I found myself, after years of writing about it, just literally disdainful of it. But I think I'm hardly alone in that. I think the American people see that. If you solve problems, you take away your electoral issues, and you don't consider the last election in terms of having consequences. You consider tactical angling for the next one, and that's not just in election years. Now it's sort of constant politicking. So that's how I read that. Sorry to be so negative.
No. I share your. I'm hard pressed to come up with the right words. I'm disgusted by it. I'm disappointed in it. It frustrates me because like you, I mean, I've been around politics for several decades, and I do remember when groups used to come together with differing political views and find ways to work across party lines and find solutions to problems that didn't always work, but they tried. And I don't see that.
It got harder in election years. Yeah, it always did, and that's not a new dynamic. It's just across the board. I've got some line in tomorrow or Tuesday's column. If we had civics textbooks anymore, the first paragraph ought to be that we don't solve problems anymore because it takes away issues for the next election. That's just what we're doing, and somehow we've evolved from a version of that or an increment of that to just a full-blown dysfunction. And I would love if somebody would prove me wrong, if this compromise could somehow get enacted. But with the House having its extreme right control, and Johnson in as the speaker, and McConnell conceding, and with Trump is the major destructive force, saying he doesn't want it. I just see it as a crisis now everyone admits exists, just being left to be the crisis until maybe forever, but certainly until we can get one of these guys, one reelected or the other reinstated. And that's what's got us stymied.
All right, let's turn our attention back to the state of Arkansas. Two developments last week. One's kind of partial, but it's progress, I guess, in terms of advancing these issues. An abortion amendment clears the Attorney General's office to go collect ballot signatures. And the FOI amendment gets the AG's approval, but the initiated act does not get the approval yet, although I think that they're working on potential solution for that. What do you make of those two issues? Getting to this point now, the real work begins, which is collecting signatures and having a pretty public debate about both of these issues.
Well, you and I have been talking about maybe a broader takeout on the emergence of these initiatives, public initiatives, and groups supporting them. That could be that could increase in power and in relevance in this era of overwhelming one-party Republican control and a powerful Republican conservative dynamic running the executive and legislative branches. Maybe there's a role for groups like these two that will be sustained. And that's a good subject to explore. The abortion amendment, I'd like to be wrong about this, but I believe that by letting abortions be allowed in cases of physical health problems, I believe that allows the other side to say this is abortion on demand, just get a friendly doctor. That's been an issue all along. I'm not optimistic about its chances, but it's good that it's there. I think as something granting some more modest exceptions would pass, but first you got to try to do what you think is the right thing before you compromise or scale back, I guess. FOI, they'll get the act on the ballot by changing one thing that Tim Griffin wants. It's taken too long. The editing has been too nitpicky. But yeah, I think we're all going to go to the grocery store and find these two petitioners wanting us to sign. And I'll certainly sign, and I hope people do. And I hope we have vigorous debate. I think the FOI thing is a near gut sense to get in the Constitution, as it should, because we have seen through Sarah Sanders that politicians can get irked about what is being found out about them, and with the right power, legislative power, get the FOI restricted. That was the impetus for this bill, or for this amendment. So those are two good developments that took a long time and a lot of teeth pulling to get to this point. We'll now sign those petitions if you want to get the chance to vote on these two things, because you'll have the opportunity.
There's other things floating out there. We'll see if they get the AG's clearance. You could have something that deals with public education, that deals with paper ballots. Medical marijuana is looking for some potential expansion. So there's a lot more that we may be talking about in this.
Which goes to this point of is something changing in the way we govern ourselves, which is an interesting thing to consider. Okay.
Let's try not to become California, though.
No. I guess not.
97 ballot issues every election cycle. That would be.
Yeah, we don't need to do that. We need to. Yeah. Okay, man.
He's John Brummett, with columnist with the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. Thank you as always.
Thank you, my friend. See you next time. Bye-bye.